Welcome back to the For All the Saints podcast, and I'm so delighted to have Greg McKeown with me, a fellow Brit. How are you, Greg?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Oh, it's my honor. I've wanted to interview you for a long time. Big fan of your books and your work, and so this is exciting. But let's get straight on with it. We are 11 years on from Essentialism's release, and it seems to have expanded so much in relevance, but also the urgency of the message. And I'm just wondering what you've observed as you've seen the message continue through this crazy past decade that we've had.
Yeah, well, essentialism is the antidote to a problem. The problem is the undisciplined pursuit of more, and the antidote is the disciplined pursuit of less. There's three elements to it. It's to explore what's essential, to create space for that, because so often we don't even have space to think or hardly to breathe, and then to use really disciplined criteria for eliminating the non-essential, and then to be able to build systems to make it as effortless as possible to do what matters most. And that's sort of the premise of essentialism. And yes, I think that in the last 11 years, we have gone beyond being distracted and are now fully disoriented. And that's a non-trivial difference, because being distracted, it takes us from the thing we know we should be doing. But to be disoriented is to not really even know what matters. And it's a function of this, the endless expansion of noise. I've given a lot of thought to that word and the idea of it over these last few years. And noise comes from the Latin nausea. It means, it's literally makes us sick. It's a seasickness type experience. And so essentialism is, yes, I think more relevant than ever now. And I feel a sense of mission to be able to expand not only who it reaches, but also to make sure that I'm providing the best insights I possibly can to help people to live it in the real world of relationships, for example. So those are some thoughts.
It's such an important mission, because it feels like, at least I get the sense sometimes, that I feel like I'm in a bit of a losing battle. My faith tells me that ultimately we'll win. We're becoming so clogged up with this constant virality, things in your face. But I feel like I'm battling often against the world's most advanced engineers who are trying to keep me on this app or whatever, or video or hook, for just another minute, and keeping
Yeah,
me hooked.
well, that's literally true. I've worked with Silicon Valley for the last 15 plus years, and it's not an accident. It's not an oversight. It's a feature, not a bug. The device in our pockets, whatever they aren't a phone. That's the last thing that they are. They're a $3 trillion military grade disorientating machine. And if we're not conscious of that, then we're no match for it. We'll be pummeled into the corner by an opponent we don't even know is there. And so, yes, it's not neutral. And that's not me saying that all technology is a bad thing by any means. It's the opportunities have already done great good in the world, and there's great, enormous benefits still to come. And at the same time, almost all new technologies make a good servant but a poor master. And so we have to be agents unto ourselves, right? We are not made to be acted upon. We're made to act for ourselves. But this enormously advanced technology and the people behind it are trying to act upon us. And so we have to be extremely conscious in the way that we utilize what has been deliberately made ubiquitous and effortless in our lives. Otherwise, we just become a function of their agenda instead of pursuing the mission that we came to Earth to pursue.
Well, interesting. When considering this mission and the core objectives of essentialism and effortless, how are you viewing the rapid advancement of technologies like artificial intelligence? Like, do you see them as opportunities, or more as opportunities than concerns, or are you viewing it the other way around? Because I can certainly see that in some aspects, with say some uses of artificial intelligence, it's really helping me to have a disciplined pursuit of less and simplify what I'm doing already, and make it lighter. But at the same time, it's kind of allowing me to do more rather
Mm.
than potentially changing how we view work. I don't know. I'd love to hear how you view it.
Well, let's start with the premise that it's one of the great game changers of our whole lives. I remember, I had signed up as one of the early users of GPT, and once the moment it became available, the very first time I used it, I literally gathered my whole family together. I was in Cambridge at the time in England, and literally all of them. And I was like, okay, sit down. We're going to use this together. You will remember this moment like for the rest of your life. This is the biggest technology moment of my life, and it's yours too. I said, let's just use this together. It was, there was, of course, just like for everybody else, there is a magic in it. It is, and that's of course not the only type of AI that exists in the world by any means. But it was the moment at which the world had a gateway into the capability and possibility of AI. It was already being used in many other ways. Its expansion was already impressive in all sorts of ways, but that was the user interface that suddenly we all could sense it in a visceral way. Now, I'm neither Luddite nor drinking the Kool-Aid. I definitely see myself somewhere in between. I mean, I had Guy Kawasaki on my podcast, who was the evangelist at Apple for years, and then that he's done the same for Google and elsewhere. And as we were finishing up the interview, we ended up having a sort of suddenly deeper conversation. He said, well, to me, he said, let me just tell you what I really think. He said, I think AI is God. And the way he described it, I was like, okay, well, you can't get more evangelist than that, right? So now we know the full edge of how someone could imagine this being. That he saw it only as good and literally God, not metaphorically. And then, of course, there's other people. I've spoken to people that will not touch it, are terrified of it, don't want to utilize it in any way. And we're going to have to figure our way through this. And I think that what we have to think about is what are the trade-offs. And I don't mean in just the grand sense. I mean in the day-to-day trade-offs. Every time I utilize it, what am I gaining and what am I giving up? There is a risk that AI will reduce our ability to write clearly, for example. And if you give up the mental exertion of writing clearly, then you can't think clearly, and then you can't speak clearly. And so there's a enormous risk to that. I recently created and it was published the Essentialism Planner. And one of the reasons that I wanted to create that paper and pen experience is because getting the noise out of our head and into a paper, analog format is so helpful. Otherwise, we can be so consumed in the noise that we no longer know what way's up and what way's down. We cannot orient ourselves. We are just, and then the risk then is a real identity shift, because we just become like a node in the AI system, and we are serving it rather than it serving us. So I certainly don't agree with Guy, although I loved having the conversation with him, and I loved his openness about what he thought. But we need to make God primary, and then we need to therefore use our agency as intentionally and deliberately as possible, and notice when we find ourselves just spinning in AI world and iterating endlessly, but not clearly to having what end. That's what I think.
I hope that I think in some ways social media and smartphones took us by surprise so much that we almost all hopefully recognize it and don't make the same mistakes, and are a bit more hesitant in that we don't want to become objects, that we don't want to become slaves to these new technologies. We want to step back. Well, I hope that's the view, but
yeah, well, I mean, you've got Zuckerberg hasn't learned anything about it, and I'm not trying to. I'm saying that. I mean, I've worked with Facebook. It's not that I think that either is all good or all bad. I lived for almost a decade, 5 minutes from Facebook HQ, and what he effectively promised with Facebook was 1,000 friends. And so when I saw him on an interview recently saying, well, right now, on average in America, people will say that they have something like 3 close friends, and their appetite is for about 15, right? So he's like, that's the market appetite. He said, I think AI friends, it won't deplete our actual friends, but it will fill the space of the demand from 4 to 15. And I that was one of the more terrifying things I've really ever heard anybody say. It's sort of somebody else commented about this, but they said it's like the personification of chutzpah, to from someone who was promising 1,000 friends, who's now publicly saying everyone only has 3 anymore, and that AI will be the solution without trade-off. And I just think that's such nonsense. But the market value will be enormously high, because, I mean, we can analyze it like this. We can say, look, there is a demand, a deep and I could say eternal demand to be understood. This is our first lesson in life, is if we are not heard, then we will die. And that's true physically, but it's also true psychologically, as some of the studies have shown. So that's on the demand side. It's not just birth, it's birth till death. So there is a massive, perpetual, universal demand to be understood. On the other side, if you say, okay, that's the demand side, you can look at the supply side and you say, well, what is the quality of our supply? How well are we understanding each other, right? How well are we offering that to meet that need? And it's self-evident that that's not being delivered at a high quality level to majority of people. And evidence of that, like the US right now, 1 in 5 people have stopped talking to a family member or friend because of polarization. That's just one example. Gen Zers will say, like 7 out of 10 Gen Zers say there isn't a single person who understands them. And we could just go on and on. Like, the data is really strong. So now you have a problem. Demand massively high, supply really low. Now, what do you get in that environment if that persists, which it has done, and it's continued now for at least generation, is that you actually get two markets. I'm not saying this is the only thing that should happen, but it's what seems to have happened. Is that you have a luxury market where people can pay to be understood. Like you could pay for a therapist, you could pay for an executive coach, you could pay now in the airlines, you only get to speak to a person if you're at a certain status. So being understood, being heard by another person is now a luxury item. But a second thing gets created as a market at the same time, which is you have a kind of a black market is created. And in that market, you get, it's just like you would with luxury goods like watches or handbags and so on, you get a knockoff item. That's what the AI friend industry is all about. It's producing a knockoff, a counterfeit for connection, for human connection. And the demand, as we already established, is massive. The market is unbelievably large. And if you can produce this in AI friends in a way that makes it sort of risk-free, what you're getting is a counterfeit, but it's a risk-free counterfeit. Now, that means people are going to pursue this. But just like any other counterfeit, you don't get the thing that you wanted. And so you set yourself up, I think, for a really potent sort of addictive possibility, because you're trying to scratch an itch in a way you can't possibly do it, but you're getting something of a counterfeit that makes you think this will get you more of it. And so I can see why Zuckerberg and others are pursuing this with a vengeance now, and I can see why it can be $1 trillion industry in its own way. And I can also see that the serious risk of allowing ourselves to be deceived by this AI friends, that's going to be the answer. That's somehow similar to it. We can do better than that. We can upgrade our own communication skills and actually massively benefit in our career, because if you upgrade the communication skills to be able to understand others precisely and rapidly, and to do the same in reverse, to be understood clearly, rapidly, then you enter that luxury market. You get to the enormous benefits in your career, in your ability to connect with large audiences, small audiences, and you get the benefit of close, not deal friends, but real friends, and you get to connect well with your spouse and with your children instead of feeling more and more disconnected, as this tendency seems to have pursued over the last few years. So there is some, to my mind anyway, really good news. It might be buried in some of this other noise, but to me, that is a really significant breakthrough possibility for people to become, to give it a term, to become signalists, people that can masters at decoding other people's real signals, and superbly talented at being able to do that in return. That to me is a space worth investing in.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's such an interesting take on it. That is fascinating. So much to think about there. And it reminds me, actually, as you speak, and I apologize for taking this a slightly more esoterical, but I did an episode recently on the podcast about William Blake.
Mm.
And I was fascinated by something I learned from him, in that he obviously wrote his most famous, recognizable poem, Jerusalem, of course, and did those feet. And there's a line in there that I was asking about, where he refers to England's dark satanic mills.
Mm.
And I thought he was only describing the old factories and kind of the smell, the unsanitary nature of them. But actually, he wasn't around at the height of the Industrial Revolution. And so what I learned is that he was not necessarily describing that, but rather he was warning about the consequences of unintentionally doing things that aren't in service of the right end result. and these dark satanic mills where you're just churning and churning and churning and on and on and on, producing things where he was feeling like we were going in the wrong direction, where we needed to recapture our imagination or whatever. But optimizing for the wrong thing. And I took that as a really interesting lesson. And I'd love to kind of put that to you, what I've learned from that and what you've learned in your journey about the importance of intentionality, and I suppose beginning with the end in mind when
Well,
it comes.
I want to come back first of all, though, to what you're, to make sure I'm even understanding what you're saying. So I get the idea that he's not there in the height of the Industrial Revolution. So then, what is he saying? So he's observing what then in his lifetime?
He's seeing the beginning of it and the
Okay.
talk of it, the fruits of it, and he's kind
So
of
he's just seeing the possibility of it. So you're saying that he is still speaking about the Industrial Revolution, but he's seeing it before it becomes, what we know it became.
yes, yeah.
And so what do you think he's warning about? You think he's warning about the Industrial Revolution that he sees coming, or you think he's warning? Yeah, help me make sure I've got that before I respond.
Of course, in that I thought he was just describing the look of them, but actually, what he's saying is the mills. He's not talking about the mills necessarily. He's describing what he's worried about as being an analogy for optimizing and refining for the wrong end, saying this isn't in service of God. And so, as a mill produces cotton, he's saying we've got dark satanic mills where we're entering into life unintentionally to produce the wrong end. If that makes sense, it's still something I'm pondering on from learning myself, but it's.
Yeah, I mean, I draw a slightly different conclusion from his observation, but maybe that's not helpful for me to share that. But I mean, these dark satanic mills, I mean, I think I typically did imagine that being an observation about, well, really okay. So the Industrial Revolution does two things. And one is unbelievably good. And one is really a real change in the human condition that's less discussed, but I think it's like the real damage that was done, because there was damage. There's no question in my mind about that. But like, just first on the argument of what it did for us. So, before the Industrial Revolution, just the survival rate of a person is so hard. And then you will spend almost your entire life after that just in survival mode. That is the mode that you live your life in. Getting enough food, getting enough shelter will consume almost your total your total effort in life, and the number of options available to people is so small compared to now. It's hard to even get our head in it. It's like David McCullough, I mean, he wasn't trained as a historian, but he won 2 Pulitzer prizes for books that he wrote. And he said, look, there's no such nobody ever lived in the past. And so he says it's really important that we get back into their mind rather than look from our perspective back as if they had some crystal ball, as if they knew they were a part of history, or as if they knew that, well, this action will lead to this thing, and so on. And so I think it's really important to try and get our head back into it's easy to romanticize the past. It's easy to say, well, there were such simpler days. And of course, that is true. It was simpler, but my goodness, it was tough. It's so hard. Life was so hard. And so the Industrial Revolution changes that beyond almost beyond belief. Buffett said it this way. He said, look, if you're to be alive today is to have as much educational, travel, optionality as I'm suddenly spacing on his name, as Rockefeller. Right, so that's 100 years of industrial revolution at play now. Industrial revolution's longer than that, but still, that 100 years, it's hard to even describe the change, even though we're living in it. Now, on the other side, what did it take from us? The Industrial Revolution was the beginning of the fragmentation of family. So for the first time, and not immediately, but for the first time, really, you had family separation. You've got women doing one thing, men doing another thing, children doing another thing, and you're in your specialization, the factory specialization model is now taking people from the cottage industries, taking them from the farms where they're living together and working together as a unit, really cooperatively. So like that's the whole story of human history up to that point, is that you are working together to survive. You know what the goal is, and you're trying to figure it out together as a unit. And it's not just one family the way we now use that term, because also prior to the Industrial Revolution, everybody's living together. So you've got multiple generations living together. And it's not even till the 1950s that the idea of the nuclear family even is a construct in the human, in the social imaginary, in our sense of what we mean by that term. The word family meant intergenerational until television came along and taught people that it meant two parents, two children living in a house together, without grandparents, without uncles and aunts, and so on. So you've got this huge shift, this tectonic shift of benefit on the one hand, and also human disconnection on the other. And broadly speaking, that has continued. So the factory is so successful in doing what it does well. It is so beyond belief. It is increasing productivity by 50 times. That's not hyperbole. That is literally true. So it does it so well that it starts being applied to everything else. And so the modern school follows almost exactly the design of a factory. That's why history is studied in a history room and geography in a geography room, and the people sit in rows just like in a factory. Schools look like factories for a very particular reason. Modern organizations, likewise, follow the basic assumptions of the factory model. They're not, if you had to choose, are they cottage models? Are they family models? Is the modern corporation based on the family cottage model, the farm model? Or is it following a factory model? And so, as that is a tension that exists to this day, where we have to figure out. It's like the rise of corporatism and the fall of everything else. And so we have to work out how we make choices, how we make trade-offs, so that at the end of our lives, we didn't just win at a corporate game. We didn't just win at the wrong game in life, and find ourselves unintentionally having given ourselves to this factory system that's so effective, but isn't great for relationships outside of it, isn't great for family dynamics or deep friendship, and so on. So these forces are still at play, and we have to find our way in them.
As you speak, and as I've read your books, I've always just been amazed at how seamlessly they connect with the spiritual. I'm so convinced that pursuit of essentialism and effortlessness is a spiritual one, even maybe primarily, possibly primarily. And I just, there are so many of Jesus's teachings that that kind of, form a really good. Well, you look in Hebrews 12 where it has that famous scripture of lay aside every weight, and then all the scriptures from Jesus, all the teachings of Jesus, telling us to place our burdens on Him, and we'll make it like it's such a big principle in Scripture too. And I was wondering, was this how influential was the spiritual side of this in your writing of the book and your desire to share these messages?
Um, I mean, it's sort of impossible in my mind anyway to really separate them in a meaningful way. So originally the book, like the first time I thought about actually writing a book on what turned out to be essentialism was with a conversation many years ago with an editor at Deseret Book. And she
Oh,
really
right.
liked the idea and then didn't really go anywhere with it. And so I just sort of left with this intent still in my mind of like, I think this is really important idea. And then, in a sense, the rest is history. But then just maybe a year ago, BYU Studies reached out to me just out of the blue and asked me to write an article, which ended up being like essentialism from a gospel lens. And so it's called What Jesus Didn't Do, the Discipled Pursuit of Less. And it was just a sort of full circle experience for me to be able to be invited to write about these ideas, and be able to do it, having a gospel lens to illuminate the subject, even beyond what we're able to do, what I'm able to do when I'm working with organizations and with teams in a business or organizational context. So it was good, enjoyable to do it.
I don't think I've read that. I can't believe I've missed that. I've got to go and read that straight after. But how have you personally? How have you? What have you found helpful in applying this to your personal life spiritually? As Latter-day Saints, we're such an active faith. We have a lay clergy, so we're so used to saying yes to things, and we take on a lot compared to other faiths. What are some practical things that you have found helpful in applying the principles of your books to your spiritual religious life?
Mm. I mean, one way to think about that answer is like the highest priority in life, I think, is the ability. It's to protect and develop the ability to prioritize. The language, like President Nelson would, his language of growing into the principle of revelation would be, in my mind, another way of saying the same thing, which is that it's sort of the opposite of the idea of being reactive to noise. It's being proactive in discerning the vital few amidst the trivial many, the meaning, the signal that can be so buried and lost in sound. And I mean, we have so many, we have some really unique, I'm looking for the word, but tools to be able to help us do that pretty breathtaking to me. Two come to mind, right? So first, the temple. I mean, where can you even go in the world today where you don't have a phone in your hand? Or even if you don't, that everybody else does. There's almost nowhere left for that. But the temple is one place. That alone, and I don't mean that that's all the temple is, obviously, but just even that single distinctive feature about the temple is absolutely, it's just so advantageous to us. And I'm thinking now of President Nelson's emphasis that we won't be able to survive spiritually without the continual, constant blessings of of the Holy Ghost in our lives. And of course, he's given so many specific promises attached to temple attendance likewise. And then the second example, so temples and then patriarchal blessings. I did an interview, it was more than a year ago now, maybe a year and a half ago, with Tim Ferriss, been on his podcast a few times, and we've become friends. Yes, I would say that's genuinely true now, and so we're having this walk and talk type interview, type conversation, and he'd said at the beginning, he'd said, "Look, we'll just talk, and then you have final cutting rights. Anything you want to cut, you just cut." And so then he asked me a question. I said, well, look, the only way to answer that is to describe what a patriarchal blessing is. Like he's asking any directional documents you use in your life or something to that end. And I said, well, let me explain what it is. And I go and explain it. And he gave me the option later, said, well, you can cut all of it, whatever you want. But then as I looked through the transcript briefly, I thought there's no way that the rest of the conversation even makes sense if we cut any of this. And I was only really thinking of cutting it just for the sacredness of it. And so in the end, it went live with all of that description and commentary, and I was so happy to be that it worked out in that way. But like, what a gift if you're trying to orient yourself in a world that is so disoriented, and you can have I mean, it's so much more than a mission statement, right? Like it's so much deeper and wiser and more precise and evolving. I mean, that, so these are two examples of things that we have that are utterly, totally unique, as far as I understand, to being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And how do you just imagine cutting those two influences, those two items out of my life journey? And it's just an unthinkable loss. Those are some of the things I think about when I think about the spiritual practice of essentialism.
It's really fascinating considering you teaching Tim Ferriss about patriarchal blessings. That it reminds me when I interviewed Brother Brad Wilcox who's just been released from the Young Men General Presidency.
Yeah, just in July 1.
Yeah, and he told me that they invited Richard Reeves to come in and visit with some of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles and with the Young Men and Young Women presidencies. And I think it was Brother Wilcox shared with him, obviously for those who don't know, Richard Reeves is a leading writer and speaker on the kind of men's issues, boys' issues. And Brother Wilcox showed him the Young Men's statement, mission statement, the theme, Young Men's theme, and said, what do you think? And Richard Reeves said, if every young man had a kind of orientation like this, a theme in their life like this that they were repeating, this would solve all of these men's and boys' problems we have. So it's fascinating to hear you discuss that and link the patriarchal blessing to this problem that you cited earlier of disorientation. Just there are so many things that we have that orient us and keep us on that path. I love that. It reminds me too, I was recently studying for a lesson. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but I came across the scripture straight and narrow path again. And someone commented and said, forget the straight and narrow path this talking about, how kind of the ordinances, that no one can just enter into the gates of heaven and, you've not done anything. There's that. But they also painted this picture of the straight and narrow path being one that you can't really wind off into distractions and different paths like that. You've got to keep focused and intentional. And I've never thought of it that way before. I thought that was fascinating in terms of learning about, just the importance of focus and orientation and single-mindedness, keeping an eye single when we are progressing in the gospel. It aligns so well with what you're saying as well.
Now you've heard this, I'm sure, before, that it's a different spelling of straight, right? So it's not straight like this. What it means is difficult. like the Straits of Gibraltar, right? Like it's a really challenging and narrow thing. So it's like, one way to think about it is like the eye of the needle metaphor, right? It's like how challenging and it has, it's about, precision. And I think that, so let's just riff on that for a moment. So, every time we go through the tree of life vision, every time we discuss that in Sunday school, somebody is going to draw up on the board, here are the symbols, and here's what they mean, right? You've seen that. We've seen it all. We've all seen it 20 times. Yeah, so one of the last times we were studying this, my wife Anna said to me, that isn't actually really what's written here. And so it made me read with new eyes what I'd read many times before without noticing. So what happens isn't that Nephi is shown the symbol and then told what it means. That isn't what happens. You know this? Am I saying something that sounds strange now? Are you like, okay, where are we going?
I'm excited to hear what you're going to say.
He says, first of all, the Spirit is the one speaking to him. The Spirit appears in the form of a man. So that's not nothing. I think that's interesting if you read just a close reading of it. And then what happens is that he is shown the symbol. So he sees well, it starts with this one. It shows the tree of life and the fruit. And then the Spirit says to him, look, and he looks, and he doesn't see, like some, I don't know, little poster that says love of God. No, he is shown a vision of something very specific. Do you know what it is? Can you recall, just without putting you on the spot? Maybe I shouldn't do that. Just answer it. Do you know? Just without looking. Don't look. Don't look. Don't look. Don't cheat.
Is it the condescension of Jesus?
Well done. He sees Mary. He sees Mary with the baby Jesus. That's what he sees. The fruit. He said, "Here is the tree of life. Here is this fruit." And he says, "Look." And he looks and he sees Mary with a baby Jesus. And then Nephi says what it means. So now he is restating the experience of seeing Mary with her baby. And he says, that is the love of God planted in the hearts of men. Now, it then proceeds to do that continually. Every symbol, he sees a part of the life of Christ and then restates what he thinks the meaning is from the life of Jesus Christ. That is so profound to me, this, beginning with that first idea, because it's not some concept. It's not the love of God as a disconnected principle. This is that intimate, vulnerable, beautiful love of a mother and this particular baby. That is the pinnacle idea. That's the goal. That's the intent. And for me, it breaks down in a useful way and fragments this the conceptual distance we can sometimes have around love or around being a member of the church or how we operate. It puts the focus just where it should be. We are trying to create connection, intimacy. We're trying to create a depth of understanding, a safety, of course, with Christ as well. And we're trying to recreate that with the people that are most important to us. That's essential.
I love that, because the love of Jesus is something I've been trying to think about a lot more recently. It was actually a woman who came on the show who's written a book about the endowment and reframing how we view the endowment as well, in that frame of love, that helped me understand that I should view the atonement as the atoning sacrifice, but also the atoning love that it took to do the
Mm.
sacrifice, and
Mm.
how just understanding that love can change your life. And it really helped me. She
Mm.
didn't know this, but in a difficult time where I felt I had failed in one of my callings,
Mm.
because I took it on and I hugely burnt out, seriously burnt out, causing a serious health issue because I just was taking far too much on,
Mm.
and I just thought I could do it all. And
Mm.
I wasn't. I felt really shameful when I requested. I'd been taught, like a lot of us,
Mm.
that I shouldn't request a release of a calling ever. You
Mm.
do it until you're released, until God wants you to release. And I found myself asking, please, can you take this off me? I just can't do it. I really want to do it. I can't do it. And yeah, trying to view it in that perspective and have that lens on it has really helped me come back into close communion with Jesus and
Mm.
understand
Well,
that a bit.
there's a lot to unpack in that story that you just shared, and I love that. Thank you for sharing it. First of all, I mean, the first, just a phrase that has been very helpful to me. It's not the primary point you're making, but just shame is shame is satanic. Just that. So that if we're feeling shame, that isn't God. Of course, we can feel, ooh, kind of messed up in that situation. Of course, we can feel the sense of like to improve. That's a different thing. But when we're feeling shame, we can be sure that that isn't godly, God's influence. Okay, so that's the first part. The second is this idea that, okay, well, we should never ask for a release from a calling. And I know what you mean, because of course that was a rule that was taught. Never ask for the calling, never ask for the release from the calling. And then we must go further. We must develop meaning frames that are closer and closer to how God sees them, and to not receive in a surface way. Well, that's the rule, the end. Well, what do you mean that's the rule, the end? This is the only way God thinks. This is the only way it operates. Or is this a guidepost to help us kind of orient ourselves closer to that baby Jesus, closer to his atoning love, so that we can then operate in the best possible way for ourselves, for our family, for the other of God's children? And so I think whenever we have to start with some kinds of rules in our lives. That's like level 1 maturity. And then if we can develop past there, we're going to move into a kind of level 2 maturity, which is sort of it's socially devised. It's like, well, how to get along with people, how to kind of read the room and sort of do similar things to them, how to not cause too many problems with, it's like this is sort of level 2. So it's not so rules-based, but it's social connection. But there is another level of maturity in our moral development. And that to me is something like co-creation with God. And it's much scarier to try to enter the third level. And you can't skip 1 and 2. You have to develop 1, you must move to 2, and then you can have the chance to move to 3. But some people are still in phase 1. And phase 1 would be where, you're following the rules of your family of origin, something like that. But so is rebellion. So rebellion of the rules of your family of origin is also level 1. It's not actually any further developed. To simply say, I'm not doing any of those things anymore, is no further developed than to say, well, I will do them. So as you move through this moral development, I think a lot of the things that we've been taught evolve and become more integrated. And we start to realize, like, for example, we start to realize, oh, the way we receive the truth is as important as the way it's taught. So even when somebody has taught something that is good and true, we have an equal responsibility. Doctrine and Covenants 50, the most unbelievable passage of what, like I have studied these verses for a long time and in a lot of depth. So the amount that's there is to be ridiculous. But it's verses 17 to 24, and it's the Lord's system for communication, how to communicate together, how to do that well. And in it, he's teaching that you must preach the truth by the Spirit of truth, and that you must, and if you do it in any other way than that, any other way, it's not of him. So let's say there's 1,000 ways to communicate. There's only one that's approved by him. And then he says you have to receive the truth by the Spirit of truth. And if you do it in any other way, it's not of him. So he is teaching a way to communicate. No, he's teaching the only way that he approves for us to communicate. There's loads of other versions. There's lots of counterfeits. There's lots of versions that are closer to that and so on. But there's one true way, and this is what he's teaching. And I think that in this level 3 maturity, as we move into moral maturity, as we strive to get there, we realize, well, I have to speak truthfully. Like, you have to go and talk to the bishop. You have to talk to someone. You have to speak the truth. That's part of what it means to be mature in one's journey and this discipled pursuit of less but better in our lives. And then you also have to think about any rules or any principles even that we've been taught and go, what do they mean for me? We have to receive them. Not just, okay, that's it. Okay, it's said in conference and I just have to start doing it. But yeah, if you do that, you're going to have 500 different things every conference. It's going to be overwhelming. You're not going to be able to make sense of it all because, of course, in a sense, there'll always be kind of contradictions, or there'll be moments where there's an exception to something. And that's perfectly natural and normal. And so my obligation when I'm watching conference or attending conference is to receive, to be as proactive in how I receive it. What does this mean for me? Heavenly Father, what does this mean for me? Not just what did they say, not what's just the story, not what's the rule that might have been introduced. What does it mean for me? It's in that process that we start to develop a more integrated discipleship, where we're more integrated with Christ directly. And we're not so risking, like, trying to be Christians without Christ, which I think is the risk of these earlier, these lower levels of moral maturity. And so I just wanted to unpack some of that because I think that's relevant to you as you wrestled with, what do I do in this situation? Am I doing something wrong here? Eventually you decide, I'll do it, but then it's complicated for you. Yes, but in the process, if you were paying attention, which I'm sure you were, what was really happening was or what could still be happening is the deepest, truest sense of the word repentance, which is the releasing of old meaning frames that are not actually fully correct yet, and the learning of a new one that is closer to the way, to God's ways and God's thoughts. And that is challenging to do. It does shake us at some level. And that's why it's harder to do it. But this is the commandment. It's to repent. And it means to unlearn the way we used to see it and start to relearn the way God actually thinks about that thing.
That's brilliant. I mean, I'm taking so many notes because I've been thinking so much about this with my new daughter, my first daughter, and really thinking I now have to teach these things to someone, and I know how influential the way I was taught was, and just like, how do I do this? So I'm gonna have to listen to that 3 or 4 more times to get. But I loved that, and I guess as we wrap up this conversation and sticking on the same theme, really, I guess I was going to kind of think, what's my final question to Greg? I've got this great opportunity to speak to him. I would have said, how do we start on our pursuit of less? But actually, I'm going to change that, because I think this is a more pertinent question to what we're talking about, and it's more genuine to me as well. Is how do we balance being essentialist, but also increasing our capacity? Because I do want to do more, and I want to be a better missionary. I want to be a better teacher. I want to be a better parent, and I want to serve in the kingdom. I want to build a kingdom. And yeah, I get these times where I'm just like, great, I'm burnt out again because I didn't learn my lesson last time. But I think in 5-10 years, I want to have a bigger capacity to be able to do those things. But how do you see that balance, and being comfortable with being able to have my heavy job, which is stressful at times, but also serve in a meaningful role in the church, and also be studying as much as I can in my personal worship? I'd love to hear from that as we close this.
One of the things we did this summer is we performed in the Nauvoo and British pageants in Nauvoo. We were just there as part of the family cast. We were there for a couple of weeks, but we were there with the Mondays from England who were core cast members for the whole summer.
Good friends of mine.
Yeah, well, it's just marvelous, all of them. And I mean, first I should say it was one of the most Zion-like experiences I've ever had. In fact, it struck me that how rare the sensation, the feeling of camaraderie and one heart, one mind, and the kind of openness of the people that were there, and everyone's just genuine friendliness. And I mean, you're just meeting people and immediately talking, connecting, and a really Zion-like experience already. And that's despite being in surreal humidity levels. You're on your feet constantly. You're learning 2 pageants within 4 days. It is early up in the morning, all the way through really till late at night. So it's extremely intense experience. But sort of despite that, or as part of that, it was also this very unifying experience. Okay, so there's a scene in the Nauvoo pageant at the very end of the pageant. There's a moment at which they have dimmed the lights completely on the temple, which you can see from the stage from behind it. And so if you're in the audience looking up, you just see the stage, and then suddenly they put the lights up on the temple, the completed, renewed Nauvoo temple. That was okay. Then you hear President Hinckley's voice, where he's speaking, as perhaps we all remember, when he's talking about, now we have Brigham's temple looking east, and we have Joseph's temple looking west, and between them is this volume of history, of sacrifice, of progress, amazing things. So there's a very distinct feeling for me as I'm looking at the temple and I'm listening to those words, and I'm seeing up there this temple that was burned down, right? Something that was destroyed. They gave everything, they sacrificed everything, then the whole thing's torn down, and there it is. It's standing right there. They thought they burned the temple down, but it's right there, right? They thought they had scattered the saints, but we're right here. We're like that. There's just hundreds of people, thousands of people, and I'm like trying to find the right word for it. That matters to me for some reason in life, to be able to name a thing, to put just exactly the right word for that. And I'm like, well, what is it what is this feeling? What is it? And at first, the the first thought's like, well, it's revenge. Like there's something, and even now there's something about that does name something. It's back, and then I think, oh, well, maybe it's sort of almost more like vengeance. It's like it's there, and then you think, well, maybe it's it's righting a wrong, or I think, well, it's redemption. It's the improvement of something, and then I'm looking at the temple and I think it's better than before. They didn't just rebuild it; it's better than the first time they built it. Like that's literally true, right? Like the electricity, the plumbing, the materials, the upkeep of it. There's so many things about it. It's actually better. And then the word comes to me. It's resurrection, right? The temple has been resurrected. Okay. When in Provo, there was a tabernacle in Provo. So not the Salt Lake Tabernacle, but the Provo Tabernacle. And it burned down. I was at BYU at the time. Anna and I were at BYU at the time, and we had state conference there. It wasn't particularly well kept up building, but it certainly was beautiful in its own way, and it's really symbolic to people. And we really could see that when it burned down, people were really devastated. And then a little while goes past, and this now is announced. This is, of course, people will know the story. It was announced that it would become a temple. That's the same feeling, right? Like whatever it is, whatever this thing is, that's the same feeling there again. It's burned down, but it's resurrected again. It's better than before. Now, the word resurrection comes from a Latin word, resurrectio, and it means this idea of standing back up, becoming again. And so this grows into, for me anyway, something so profound. I will connect all these dots. So my mother's an amazing person. She's a convert to the church. She joins the church at 17. She has, in the end, 6 children. She's devoted. She really gave everything she could, and she got so many more things right than wrong. And she has struggled with serious mental challenges. Let's say that. So, and the ramifications of those are not small, right? There's a lot to that. I share that because I wish to make sort of these connected points. So most people know, almost everybody has heard of the term PTSD, right? This is post-traumatic stress disorder. We all know that. We all experience at some time or other some kind of trauma, sometimes many, at various levels. And PTSD, of course, is like we're worse than before because we're still reliving that memory, and it's metastasized. It is. We are not healthy again. And so this is a symptom of the trauma that we've experienced that is happening. Now, what's less well known is that you can have post-traumatic recovery, okay, PTR, and that is that you become healthy again, that you have processed the experience. Maybe in some ways you've minimized it, or you've somehow tried to move on in your life, and so you're at parity. You're where you were before. Not the same, but at a similar level of mental and or physical health, or whatever the trauma affects us with. Okay, even less well known, like almost not known at all anywhere that I share this research, is post-traumatic growth. So it's PTG, and that is that the experience is metabolized. So it's not metastasized, but it metabolizes, and we are actually better than we were before. And now here's how it all comes together, is that Jesus seems to have this unique capacity, and it's beyond belief when you think about it. Not to remove negatives and replace them with positives, but to turn negatives into positives, actually metabolizing bad into good. And that is the resurrecting power. So, of course, actual resurrection, life and death in the way that we would normally think, reuniting of body and spirit, is like that's the great hope and miracle of Christ. It's like I'm not in any way minimizing that by also adding to it that his resurrecting power goes beyond even that he can turn all negatives into positives as we turn to him. That, like, the scriptural idea is beauty for ashes, not instead of, beauty for ashes. The ashes become something beautiful. That, I think, is the real sense of repentance that we've been talking about, of the real growth, the real maturation in life, the fulfilling the measure of one's creation, the idea that we move from light to light in Doctrine and Covenants 50, back to that verse, from light to light until the perfect day. All of this is aligned, because all of it's around this idea of metanoia. President Nelson quoted it recently, but it's something I've been studying for a long time. And metanoia is really seeing yourself, others, and God with new eyes. And that is the iterative, continual, disciplined pursuit that will help us become more like God and less like our former version of ourselves. We're new men, new creatures in Christ again and again in this upward cycle. To me, the goal is that kind of resurrection. We become actually better than before. So there's my answer to your question.
Amazing. Thank you, Greg. Just so uplifting, and I'm so grateful for your time today. I just kind of want to leave it there. I don't want to add any of my thoughts to it, because it's just such a great ending. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for your time today, and I can't wait to re-listen to this, and it's just been such an honor to speak to you.
Ben, thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching For All the Saints. This show needs your help to grow. Please like the video, comment your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone you think would enjoy it. Thank you.